In 1814, in a crowded English marketplace, a man tied a rope around his wife's waist. He stood her beside cattle, and he auctioned her off. The crowd laughed. Some men shouted bids. Someone compared her price to a horse. She sold for 5 shillings and a dog. This was not satire. It was not street theater. And it was not rare. For nearly 2 centuries in England, working-class men publicly sold their wives at markets as a substitute for divorce. It sounds medieval, barbaric, almost cartoonishly cruel, but it happened during the Industrial Revolution, in a society that described itself as civilized. To understand why this happened, you have to understand something uncomfortable. Divorce, for most of history, was not an option. Not emotionally, not socially, not legally. If you were wealthy in 18th century England, you could petition Parliament for a divorce. It required lawyers, public scandal, political connections, and enormous money. The cost would equal hundreds of thousands of dollars today. For ordinary people, farmers, laborers, factory workers, marriage was permanent. It did not matter if the marriage was violent. It did not matter if there was infidelity. It did not matter if both parties wanted out. Legally, you were trapped. And when law traps people, they improvise. By the 1700s, a strange custom had begun appearing in newspapers. Men leading their wives into markets with a rope or halter, sometimes tied around the waist, sometimes loosely held in the hand. The symbolism was deliberate. It mirrored the sale of livestock. Cows, sheep, horses. The wife would stand beside them as the husband announced the auction. Some men listed grievances. She is lazy. She nags. She spends too much. Others listed virtues. She is a good housekeeper. She can cook. She is strong and healthy. The crowd gathered. Bidding began. Sometimes the amounts were small, a few shillings. Sometimes it included alcohol. Once, a man reportedly accepted a Newfoundland dog in partial payment. The spectacle could be crude, loud, drunken. But here is where it becomes complicated. In many documented cases, the wife already knew the buyer. Sometimes the buyer was her lover. Sometimes she had requested the sale. Sometimes the entire event was arranged beforehand. A public performance to formalize what everyone already knew. In working-class communities, reputation mattered. Leaving privately could destroy your standing. But being sold created a strange kind of social reset. It signaled transfer of responsibility. The husband relinquished claims. The buyer assumed them. It was not legally recognized. But socially, it was often treated as binding. That does not make it humane. It does not make it fair. But it makes it more complicated than pure cruelty. Not every sale was forced. Not every sale was consensual. And that tension sits at the center of this story. Under English law at the time, a married woman had no separate legal identity from her husband. She could not own property independently. She could not easily leave with custody of children. She could not vote. Her legal existence was absorbed into his. This system was called coverture. It meant that when a man sold his wife, he was symbolically transferring control. Courts officially condemned wife sales. Judges declared them illegal, but enforcement was inconsistent. Local authorities often looked the other way, because there was no alternative. If a violent couple separated unofficially, it created chaos. Who paid debts? Who supported children? Who had legal responsibility? Wife sales, crude as they were, offered clarity, a community workaround. And communities tolerated it because the law offered nothing better. The Industrial Revolution intensified the issue. Urban migration packed strangers together. Marriage breakdowns became more visible. Newspapers began publishing accounts with increasing frequency. Some mocked the practice as backward. Others treated it as curiosity. Rarely did they frame it as scandalous. In 1847, a sale in Somerset drew a crowd of 2,000 people. 2,000. This was not a secret ritual. It was public spectacle. And here is the unsettling part. Many participants did not view it as immoral. They viewed it as practical. We like to imagine the past as morally superior, more traditional, more stable. But tradition often meant rigidity, and rigidity breaks people, so people bend the rules. By the mid-1800s, pressure for divorce reform began growing. Industrial society was changing values. In 1857, a new law made civil divorce possible without parliament. It was still unequal, but it lowered the barrier. And as legal divorce slowly became accessible, wife sales began declining. Not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily. The last well-documented English wife sale occurred in 1913. 1913. The same era as early cinema. Wife sales did not belong to the medieval past. They overlapped with modernity. And that overlap makes this story uncomfortable, because it challenges the myth of clean progress. We assume civilization rises neatly, but history is messy. In many cases, wife sales were negotiated exits. In others, humiliating disposals. Some women used them strategically. Some had no choice. Some historians argue that in certain cases, wife sales gave women more agency than the law did. Others argue that framing it that way romanticizes coercion. Both arguments have weight. Imagine standing in that market, the smell of livestock, mud underfoot, men shouting bids, a rope around your waist. Was it shame, relief, fear, freedom? Maybe all of it at once. In a society that denied women legal independence, this crude ritual sometimes created a loophole, a public declaration that she was no longer bound. And yet, it required her body to be displayed as property. That contradiction defines the era. Property and person, contract and humiliation, escape and spectacle. As divorce laws improved in the 20th century, wife sales faded into folklore. Today, the story feels absurd, almost unbelievable. And yet newspapers recorded them plainly. Names, prices, locations. Not myth, documented. The past is not cleaner than the present. It is not more moral. It is simply different in its constraints. And when people are constrained, they improvise. Sometimes with dignity, sometimes with cruelty. Often with both. Marriage was forever, unless someone had 5 shillings, unless someone had a rope, unless the crowd was willing to watch. History is not just kings and wars. It is ordinary people solving impossible problems in imperfect ways. And sometimes those solutions look shocking to us. But someday, something we accept as normal will look just as strange.
Is stranger than you think. From forgotten battles to bizarre inventions, we uncover the stories that make you say, "What the history?"